I gave all I had throughout my life, love, time, money, and myself, until I heard something one evening while eating food I had purchased that broke my heart forever. This is more than simply a humiliating tale. It's an awakening tale. This story is for you if you've ever felt invisible in your own house. Please remember to subscribe and let me know where you're viewing from in the comments section. I want to hear your tale as well. As I ran errands for a dinner I wasn't even meant to be there, I could still smell the roast chicken I had seasoned that morning, slowly cooking, the clink of crystal glasses, and the faint buzz of jazz music that filled the house I had paid for. However, Olivia had neglected to inform me that her parents would be visiting again, so I was there to make sure the home was in top condition. I should have realized I shouldn't have stayed. When her mother inquired, "And you are?" with those half-condescending, half-inquisitive eyes, I should have realized what was about to happen. No beat was missed by Olivia. She laughed as if it were the most hilarious thing ever. "Oh," she continued, "that's Margaret, our unofficial maid, who keeps the house running." Everyone, even my kid, laughed. I carried the empty wine bottle up from the cellar and simply stood there clutching it. I gave a courteous grin, as though my heart weren't breaking apart and I didn't feel the floor vanishing beneath my feet. I put the bottle on the counter, excused myself, and took my time making my way to my bedroom. Behind me, they continued to chuckle. My own kid was not among those who cared to correct her, to say, "That's my mother," or to say anything else. I didn't get any sleep that night. I sat on my bed's edge and gazed at the door that I had painted myself when we first moved in. I recalled my name, credit score, and down payment from the day I signed the mortgage documents. Ethan was a recent college graduate. Olivia had not yet appeared in the photo. They had nothing. I threw myself into them. And I was the maid now. As usual, I prepared coffee the following morning. Olivia claimed to appreciate the cat I fed. I waited till she walked downstairs in her yoga attire, too preoccupied with her phone to even say good morning. After a while, she glanced up. I gave her the keys to the front door, the rear door, the mailbox, and the garage. She questioned, her well-groomed brow wrinkled. "What's this?" I grinned. "Good luck paying the mortgage now." She blinked. "What?" I passed her as I went down the hallway, past the framed pictures, the well-selected furnishings, and the painted walls. I just took the coat I wore when I brought Ethan home from the hospital and my pocketbook. I didn't even bid them farewell. As I opened the door, I heard Ethan yelling my name. I continued to walk while he raced barefoot on the driveway after me. I didn't force the car door shut. Something inside of me had cracked, but not in the way you might assume, so I closed it gently and carefully. It wasn't anger. It wasn't sorrow. Clarity was the key. And the scariest thing of all was that clarity is silent. It doesn't yell. It's not begging. It simply knows. And for the first time in my life, I realized that I was finished. I knew where I wasn't staying, but I wasn't sure where I was going. Ethan was standing in the driveway, looking shocked, when I last looked in my rearview mirror. How much he had just lost was unknown to him. Nor did I as of yet. It's been said that until you breathe, you don't realize you were drowning. It wasn't independence, yet that first night in the tiny flat my great-aunt Ruth had left me. It was quiet, a dense, resonant quiet that descended like dust on everything. With its yellowed wallpaper, ancient flooring, and a heater that moaned as if it had seen better decades, the flat had an odor of time. I stood there wondering if I should laugh or cry, and dropped my bag on the kitchen table. I didn't do either. I stood there looking at the broken tiles and thinking about the house I had just left. For me, however, it was no longer a home. I moved like a ghost during the course of the next days. The bedroom's bed frame was broken, so I slept on the sofa. I consumed microwave soup and peanut butter sandwiches. I didn't call anyone because no one had phoned me, not because I was alone. Ethan didn't email, didn't text, didn't say anything. Olivia had warned him not to, I guess. Or worst, perhaps he simply didn't give a damn. I couldn't stop thinking about that supper, how they laughed, and how he laughed. When my ex-husband left, I was left to raise the boy by myself. I sacrificed myself, my aspirations, and my job to maintain a roof over our heads. I shopped groceries before morning and cleaned hotel rooms at night. And I utilized all of the insurance money my parents gave me after they passed away to purchase a house. I never demanded rent from him or forced him to pay anything. and I had somehow turned into the aide in Olivia's universe. I started writing at night, old spiral notebooks, the kind I used to buy for Ethan in middle school. I filled page after page, not for anyone to read, just for me. I wrote things I had never said out loud, about how I used to stand in the kitchen and wait for him to say thank you, about how I'd cry in the garage when they'd go out to dinner and not invite me, about how I pretended to be asleep so I wouldn't hear them mocking my TV shows in the living room I paid for. And then one day, while looking for a light bulb in the upstairs storage closet, I found the old metal trunk Ruth used to keep under her sewing machine, heavy rusted. I pried it open, expecting thread and buttons. Instead, I found envelopes, dozens of them, and one in particular that changed everything. It was addressed to me in Ruth's familiar handwriting, dated nearly 3 decades ago. If you're reading this, it means you've come back, and I'm sorry you had to. My heart pounded as I unfolded the pages. They were yellowed, fragile. Inside were copies of hospital forms, notes, and a single photograph of a newborn wrapped in a hospital blanket, not Ethan. There was a name, Michael Jameson. I read the letter 3 times before it made any sense. Ruth had been a nurse at the hospital where Ethan was born. She said she always had doubts. She'd seen something odd in the nursery the night I gave birth, a last-minute room switch, a confusion with the tags. But by the time she raised the issue, it was too late. The babies had already gone home. She never told me, said she was afraid, said she hoped she was wrong. But then, years later, she found a document buried in her files, a quiet settlement from the hospital to another family. And that's when she knew Ethan wasn't my son. My hands trembled. I thought I might pass out. I stared at the photo, at the name Michael Jameson. My mind refused to process it because if this was true, who was Ethan? Who was I to him? And then something strange happened. I didn't feel grief. I didn't feel rage. I felt free, not because I didn't love Ethan, but because suddenly all those years of pain, of feeling like a stranger in my own life, made sense. Maybe that coldness I always felt from him, maybe it wasn't imagined. Maybe he always felt like a stranger. And maybe I wasn't crazy after all. I spent the rest of the night reading every paper in that trunk. Ruth had kept it all: DNA reports, affidavits, a small article about the Jameson family, successful, educated, local, and still living in the same town. My real son had been here all along, growing up just a few miles away. I folded the letters back carefully, placed them in a new envelope, and put them in my nightstand drawer. Then I looked at myself in the mirror for a long, long time. I didn't recognize the woman looking back at me, but for the first time in a long time, I wasn't ashamed of her. She was broken, yes, but she was waking up, and the world had no idea what that meant yet. There's a kind of silence that doesn't feel peaceful. It feels punishing. That was the kind of silence I lived in for weeks after reading Aunt Ruth's letter. I didn't know what to do with the information. I carried it inside me like a live wire, dangerous to touch, impossible to ignore. I didn't reach out to Ethan. I didn't go looking for Michael. I just existed. Each day I woke up, made a single cup of coffee, stared out the dusty kitchen window, and tried to understand who I was now. The Margaret who raised Ethan wasn't the same woman who read those letters. That Margaret was a mother, a wife once, a caregiver, a giver of everything. But who was I without that identity? One evening, the heater went out in the apartment. I lit a candle and bundled myself in blankets, curling up on the couch with the hospital files in my lap. I must have read them 100 times. Every line, every signature, every timestamp, it all checked out. It was real. My real son, Michael Jameson, was born on the same night as Ethan, in the same wing, in a hospital that would later settle quietly with another family, hoping the truth would never surface. Ruth had made copies of everything before she passed. She left me the pieces of a truth that had been stolen from me. I felt grief, but not for Ethan. I grieved the time, the moments I could have had with Michael, the birthday parties, the first days of school, the scraped knees and science projects. All those things I thought I was doing for my child, they were meant for someone else. And yet, somehow, I didn't feel hatred toward Ethan. My love for him hadn't been biological. It had been unconditional, or so I thought. But when someone you raise doesn't defend you, doesn't even see you, it forces you to reevaluate everything. It was a Tuesday afternoon when I finally pulled myself together. I had been hiding too long. I wasn't ready to confront Ethan, not yet. But I could start somewhere quiet. I walked into town and stood across the street from the little bookstore near Main and Elm, Jameson's Books. It was painted in deep green with hand-lettered signs on the windows. I'd passed it dozens of times before and never noticed it. He was there, Michael. I didn't need to ask. He looked about 30, maybe a little older, clean-cut, reading glasses. He was helping a young woman find a poetry book. His voice was soft, patient. His posture was gentle but sure of itself. I stood across the street, heart pounding, eyes fixed on the son I never knew I had, and I cried right there on the sidewalk. Not sobbing, not loudly, just quiet, unstoppable tears that rolled down my cheeks and into the collar of my coat. I didn't go in, not that day. I just watched. And then I did it again the next day, and the next. It became a ritual. I'd walk the block, sit on the bench near the corner, pretend to check my phone or drink coffee from a paper cup, and I'd watch Michael living the life I was never part of. It wasn't stalking. It was mourning, but also preparation. Because slowly, I was starting to put the pieces together. While I sat outside that bookstore, I started noticing things. The schedule of deliveries, the names of customers, the rhythm of the store. I was observing, yes, but not just him, them, Ethan and Olivia. I started tracking them, too, subtly. I knew their patterns from memory. Olivia always posted on social media, tagging her favorite brunch spots, yoga studios, and wine tastings. It wasn't hard to follow the trail. And what I saw made me nauseous. They weren't struggling. They were pretending. Olivia's business, some lifestyle coaching brand, was mostly smoke and mirrors, rented office space, paid followers, credit cards maxed out to maintain appearances. And Ethan, he had quit his job 6 months ago. Olivia called it manifesting a new chapter. I called it delusion. They were building a house of cards, and they had no idea the wind was coming. I didn't tell anyone what I had discovered, not yet. Instead, I started keeping a second journal, not like the first, filled with emotions and heartbreak. This one was strategic. Dates, names, business filings, public records. I wasn't just grieving anymore. I was planning. They thought I was gone, invisible, irrelevant. But I was more present than I had ever been. And I was about to remind them exactly who I was. The first time I saw Michael up close, I couldn't speak. It was a rainy Thursday. The bookstore was nearly empty, and he was restocking the biography section, humming under his breath. I had lingered outside too long, and when he turned and looked through the front window, our eyes met. He gave a polite, welcoming smile, nothing more, just the kind of kindness you offer a stranger. And that's what I was to him, a stranger. My heart clenched. I turned away quickly, pretending to check my phone, but my hands were shaking too hard to fake it convincingly. I walked fast, ducking around the corner, barely making it to the car before the tears came. How do you tell someone that their entire life started with a mistake? How do you look a grown man in the eye and say, "You're not who you think you are, and neither am I"? I went home and pulled out Ruth's letter again, read it 3 more times. She hadn't just discovered the truth. She had investigated it. The name Michael Jameson wasn't a guess, it was confirmed. She had found the settlement papers. The hospital never told me, because I was never meant to know. And the Jamesons, they must have known something, maybe not the full truth, but enough to accept a quiet payout. But I wasn't here for revenge against them. I wasn't even sure what I was here for. I just wanted to know him, to see if the ache in my chest could be filled by the reality of who he was. So I went back. I started small. I bought a book. Michael rang it up himself. "Good choice," he said with a smile. "Hard to find these days." His voice was warm, familiar in a way that made my throat tighten. He handed me the bag, his fingers brushing mine for a second. I nodded. "You own this place." "Sort of," he said. "My parents helped me get started. They're retired now, so I keep busy here." Of course they helped. Of course he had support. Not like Ethan, who'd had nothing but my blood, sweat, and sacrifice, and who had turned around and offered me up as a joke. Michael had parents, but not me. And Ethan had me, but never wanted what I gave. The universe had scrambled the puzzle and left us all bleeding over the wrong pieces. I started visiting the bookstore every few days, casual. Sometimes I bought a novel, sometimes just browsed. Michael began to recognize me. He'd say, "Back again," with that easy smile. We made small talk. Weather, books, local events. I never told him my name, not yet. It wasn't time. Meanwhile, back in the shadows of my old life, things were shifting. Ethan sent me one message, a text that said, "Mom, are you okay?" Nothing more. After 3 weeks of silence, that's what I got. I didn't reply. I had nothing left to say. But I started looking deeper into their world. I pulled up the deed to the house. It was still in my name. Olivia had tried to refinance without my permission, denied. She couldn't afford the mortgage. Ethan had no income. I could have evicted them on the spot, but that would have been too easy. No, I needed them to feel the slow unraveling, the fear, the realization that the foundation they stood on wasn't just fragile, it belonged to someone else entirely. Me. Every night I wrote. My new journal was meticulous. Every receipt, every conversation, every time Michael mentioned a hobby, a favorite author, a childhood memory, I wrote it down. Not to use against him, but to understand the son I never got to raise. And in between the lines, I began to see the truth more clearly than I ever had before. Ethan didn't treat me poorly because he was switched at birth. He treated me poorly because he chose to, because Olivia gave him permission to, because somewhere along the line, he stopped seeing me as someone to respect and started seeing me as someone to dismiss. But Michael, he didn't know me at all. And yet he treated me with more kindness in 5 minutes than Ethan had in 5 years. I wasn't ready to tell him, not yet, but I was close. And when the time came, I wouldn't just tell him who I was. I would tell him everything. About the hospital, about the switch, about the life that was stolen from us both. But first, I had to finish watching the collapse of the life I had already left behind. Because once the final piece fell, I wouldn't be looking back. I never planned to become a shadow in my own story. But sometimes the only way to see people clearly is to step out of the light. After that day in the bookstore, things shifted inside me. Not suddenly, but like a slow sunrise creeping across a frozen field, quiet, inescapable. I didn't rush anything. I wasn't just trying to reconnect with a son I never knew. I was trying to reclaim myself. I began walking a little taller, speaking a little stronger. I bought a secondhand laptop and began typing my notes into files. Evidence, timelines, names. This wasn't a diary anymore. It was strategy, survival. And one thing became crystal clear. Ethan and Olivia's world was held together by duct tape and lies. The house they lived in, my house, was still under my name. Olivia's lifestyle business, Olivia Ascends, was a fabricated empire. Fake clients, fake testimonials. She built a brand on buzzwords and filters, selling personal growth advice while driving a leased luxury car she couldn't afford. I found the LLC paperwork online. I checked tax records. I looked up business reviews. Every post she made was curated. Every event they attended was a photo op. And behind it all was debt. So much debt. Maxed out cards, a defaulted private loan, Ethan's student debt still unpaid. They were suffocating under a mountain of bills, but too proud to say a word, or maybe too arrogant. That's when I knew if I pulled just one string, everything would fall. But I didn't, not yet, because I had one more step to take first. Michael. I still visited the bookstore, and he still didn't know who I was. But each interaction chipped away at the fear. We talked about books, about life, about small things. TV shows, good coffee, city noise. Once we sat at the tiny cafe next door, and he told me about how he almost became a teacher, but his love for books pulled him into business. "You remind me of someone," he said once, sipping his tea. "Someone I can't place." I smiled. "Maybe a librarian." He laughed. "Maybe." That moment stayed with me for days. I didn't just like him. I recognized him, not just by the file I had read or the photo Ruth left me, but in the way he treated people, in the way he listened, the quiet strength in him. It felt like mine. It was in his posture, his calm, his presence. I started dreaming about a different life, one where I'd raised him, one where we baked cookies in the kitchen, where I took him to soccer games and cheered from the sidelines. I could picture it so vividly it made my chest ache. But I couldn't go back. So, I planned for what was next. The first thing I did was call a lawyer, not for revenge, for justice. I wanted the house sold. I had every legal right to it. I made the down payment, paid every bill, and never signed it over. Ethan had always said, "We'll put it in your name later. No rush." Of course, there was no rush for him. I was paying everything. Now, I wanted my name back, my rights, my home. If not physically, then legally. I met with an attorney downtown, a woman about my age, sharp and direct. She listened without judgment. When I told her what happened, she nodded slowly and said, "We'll file the motion this week." I signed the papers with a steady hand. That evening, I walked past the house. The porch light was on. Olivia was sitting on the swing, scrolling on her phone, glass of wine in hand. Inside, Ethan was on the couch, playing video games. Their lives were running on autopilot, no idea that the ground beneath them was already shifting. It wasn't about punishing them. It was about restoring balance. And when the house sold, they would feel what I had felt for years. Powerless. And maybe, just maybe, they'd understand what it meant to be discarded. I didn't slam doors. I didn't scream. I just watched, waited, and walked away. The first domino had fallen, and none of them even knew it yet. I've always believed that silence is stronger than noise, that true strength isn't in how loud you fight, but in how deeply you know you're right. The day the official notice went out to Ethan and Olivia, I was sitting at a cafe near the courthouse, stirring honey into my tea with a calm I hadn't felt in years. My lawyer said they'd receive it by 9 a.m. sharp. My phone buzzed. "Ethan." I stared at the screen until it stopped ringing. Then I turned it over and let the silence speak for me. It wasn't that I didn't want to hear his voice. I just wasn't ready to hear him lie. Later that afternoon, I checked my email and saw his message. It wasn't long. Just, "Mom, what are you doing? Please call me. Olivia is freaking out." Of course she was. The mortgage was due, and now they couldn't refinance because the person they thought was too weak to matter was the one holding the deed, and they never saw it coming. A week later, I got another call, Olivia this time. I didn't answer her either. She left a voicemail, her tone tight, barely controlled. "Margaret, we really need to talk. This is all it's a misunderstanding. Ethan says you're going through something, and we're here to support you, but you're putting our lives at risk, and that's not fair." I listened twice. She called the house hers, and my silence. It became sharper, more deliberate. They didn't understand yet, but they would. 2 days later, Ethan showed up at my apartment. I saw him through the peephole before he even knocked. Hair uncombed, dark circles under his eyes. A man unraveling. I didn't open the door. He stood there for a long time, knocked once, then again, then said, "Mom, please don't do this." I stood on the other side, my hand on the knob, but I didn't turn it. I let him sit in the discomfort of being unheard, just like I had for years. The following week, my lawyer finalized the paperwork to list the house. I would get the full profit, every cent legally, ethically, emotionally. All of it was mine. Olivia tried to fight it. She claimed contribution of value. My lawyer smiled and said, "Let's see her prove it in court." She couldn't, because she never invested in anything but appearances, and now those were crumbling, one filter at a time. Word got out. Olivia's parents stopped commenting on her social media posts. Clients began backing out. She made a video trying to explain the unfairness of generational property law. People saw through it, and I didn't post a thing. I just kept showing up at Michael's bookstore. We had coffee again, talked about an old novel we both loved. He recommended a memoir to me. "It's about grief," he said, "but also forgiveness." I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. "I think you'd like it," he added. Maybe I would, but not yet. I wasn't done grieving or forgiving. At home, I began boxing up old photos, pictures of Ethan as a baby, school portraits, birthday parties where I did all the work and got none of the credit. I didn't throw them out, but I put them away because the woman who had spent her life giving everything was gone. And the woman who took her place, she wasn't angry. She was awake. The papers were signed. The house was going on the market, and somewhere inside that green bookstore across town, my real son laughed at something a customer said, completely unaware that his life was about to change, too, but in the best way. Because not all losses are tragedies. Some of them are beginnings in disguise. I always thought masks were something people wore at costume parties, but Olivia wore hers like a second skin. Flawless, smiling, unshakable, the kind of woman who always knew how to pose for a photo, how to angle her voice just right in public. But the thing about masks, eventually they crack, and I was about to shatter hers completely. The idea came to me one morning while browsing the local business directory. I had already gathered enough personal dirt, credit problems, fraudulent Instagram partnerships, late mortgage payments. But I wanted more than rumors. I wanted facts, something concrete, something they couldn't spin. So, I hired a local business consultant, a man named Darren, quiet, professional, discreet. I told him I needed a full audit of a business, nothing illegal, just a private deep dive into its structure. I gave him Olivia's company name, Olivia Ascends LLC. He got to work. A week later, he delivered everything in a neat folder. And what he found, even I wasn't prepared for. Olivia's entire business model was a lie. No tax filings for the last 2 quarters, several invoices forged to look like they came from real clients, but the clients didn't exist. Photo shoots staged at rented properties she claimed were home makeovers. Her so-called partnerships were just affiliate links with inflated metrics. She wasn't just pretending to be successful, she was deceiving everyone. I asked Darren, would this hold up under scrutiny? He looked at me and said, if this goes public, she's finished, financially, professionally. And that's when I made a decision. I printed everything. Then I found the address of Olivia's parents, the same people who once laughed in my home, clinking wine glasses while their daughter humiliated me in my own kitchen. I mailed them the file anonymously. No letter, no signature, just a simple note on top that read, everything you think you know is a performance. 2 days later, the first cracks appeared. Olivia's Instagram went quiet. No stories, no curated morning routines. Her newest post, an inspirational quote about being misunderstood, was flooded with strange comments. Then, like dominoes, her world began to collapse. Her website went offline for maintenance. Her last planned workshop was canceled due to unforeseen circumstances. And then I heard the cherry on top from an old neighbor who still followed her. Olivia's mother was seen leaving her house in a rage, shouting on the phone, face red, purse swinging wildly. Whatever happened behind those closed doors, it wasn't filtered, and it wasn't pretty. Ethan called me again that night. I didn't answer. He left another voicemail. Mom, I don't know what's happening. Olivia's parents aren't speaking to us. Someone sent them stuff, documents. They think we forged them. Did you? Did you do this? I didn't reply. He was finally seeing her for who she really was, and himself, too. He had spent years defending a woman who destroyed everything in her path, starting with me. Let him feel it. Let him sit in it. That night, I walked to the bookstore again. Michael was closing up. He waved when he saw me. Back again, he said, unlocking the door to let me in. You should just work here at this point. I smiled. Maybe I should. We sat on the floor, surrounded by stacked paperbacks. He was cataloging a new shipment. I helped without being asked. Why do you come here? He asked, not unkindly. The question caught me off guard. I looked at him. He had my eyes. I hadn't noticed before. I like the way it feels in here, I said, like nothing's pretending to be something it's not. He tilted his head, considering me. Me too. We worked in silence after that. No small talk, no more questions. But in that quiet, something settled between us. Not truth, not yet, but something close, a thread connecting us. And for the first time, I didn't feel like a ghost in someone else's life. I felt seen. And the woman who once stood invisible in her own kitchen, she was gone. In her place stood someone they never expected, someone they never should have underestimated. I used to think heartbreak came in one big blow, like a car crash or a door slamming shut. But it's not like that, not always. Sometimes it comes slowly, like water leaking through a roof, drip by drip, until one day the whole ceiling collapses. And Ethan, he was finally standing under the flood. The news had reached him by then. The house was officially listed. The mask Olivia wore had crumbled, her business exposed, her reputation unraveling, and with nowhere else to point the blame, Ethan did what he always did. He came running to me. I heard the knock before I saw him. It was a quiet afternoon. I was just finishing a cup of tea when the sound echoed through the apartment, 3 soft raps, hesitant, like the knock of someone who didn't know if he'd be welcomed or slammed. I opened the door slowly. He looked like he hadn't slept in days, unshaven, thinner than I remembered, shirt wrinkled like he pulled it off the floor. "Mom," he said, voice cracked. "Can I come in?" I didn't answer, just stepped aside. He walked in and stood in the middle of the room like he didn't know what to do with his body. For a long time, neither of us spoke. Finally, he broke. "Why are you doing this?" he asked. "To us." I almost laughed. Us. As if there had been an us in years. I sat down in the armchair across from him, calm, composed. "I'm not doing anything to you, Ethan. I'm doing something for me." His jaw clenched. "You're selling the house. My house. I grew up there. And you gave it away," I said, my voice low. "You let your wife turn me into your maid. You watched it happen. You laughed. You never even apologized." He didn't deny it, just looked at the floor. "I thought you were just being dramatic," he mumbled. "I didn't know it hurt you like that." I stared at him. "That's the problem, Ethan. You never bothered to know what hurt me. You just assumed I'd always be there, cleaning up after you, paying your bills, nodding along while you let that woman chip away at who I was." He flinched. "Olivia's not who I thought she was. That's not news to me." He finally looked up at me. His eyes were glassy now. "I lost everything. I didn't blink. No, you gave it away." Silence stretched between us. "I miss you," he whispered. I sat up straighter. "I raised you," I said. "Fed you, clothed you, sacrificed for you, and you let me be humiliated in the house I bought." His lip trembled. "I thought she was helping me. I thought we were building something." "You built a lie," I said. "And now it's falling apart." He stood then, pacing the room. "So that's it? You just walk away?" I got up, walked over to the drawer by the kitchen, and pulled out the envelope Ruth left me. I held it in my hands. "I'm going to tell you something now," I said. "And I need you to listen. Really listen." He nodded, confused. I handed him the envelope. "These are your birth records. Read them." He sat, opened it slowly. His brow furrowed, then fell. He read the letter, the hospital files, the DNA test Ruth had quietly ordered after all those years. He looked up at me, eyes wide. This can't be real." "It is. You're saying I'm not your son. I'm saying you weren't born to me, but I raised you as if you were. I gave you every piece of me, even when you didn't want it." He went pale. "So who's your real son?" I didn't answer. He sat there, shell-shocked, mouth open, pages trembling in his hands. "I don't know who I am anymore," he whispered. "Now you know how I felt," I said. "For years." He didn't cry, not really. But something in him broke. And I saw it happen. Not with anger, not with satisfaction, just peace. Because I finally said what needed to be said. I walked him to the door. He turned, eyes pleading. "Can we fix this?" I met his gaze. "I don't know," I said, "but it's not my job to try anymore." And I closed the door gently behind him, not with spite, but with finality. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't the one holding it open. It took me 3 days to decide how I was going to do it. I practiced the conversation in front of the mirror, in my car, even in line at the grocery store with my hand clutched around a basket of oranges, whispering lines I could barely finish. "I'm your mother. There was a mistake. You've lived a life that wasn't meant to be yours. And so have I. But nothing sounded right. Because how do you drop a truth like that into someone's life and expect them to survive the impact? Still, I had to try. Michael was in the bookstore, like always. The light inside fell through the windows in golden beams, softening the shelves and scattering shadows across the hardwood floor. It felt like a sacred space, a place where truth belonged. When he looked up and smiled, I almost turned around and walked away, but I didn't. "Hey," he said. "You came at the right time. We just got a new batch of rare poetry editions." I swallowed the lump in my throat. "Actually," I said, I came to talk." He studied me for a second, sensing something in my voice. "Sure, come on back." He led me through a side door to a tiny break room, a kettle on the counter, a mismatched couch, a chip table, real life, no filters. We sat. "I've been coming here for a reason," I started, twisting my hands together. "I figured," he said softly. "You have. You're not exactly here for the books. I gave a small, sad laugh. No, I'm not. Then I took out the envelope, Ruth's letter, the birth records, the DNA proof, and set it on the table between us. What's this? He asked, cautious. Something that's going to change everything. He looked at me, waiting. 30 years ago, I said, my voice breaking. There was a mistake at the hospital. 2 babies switched at birth. His eyebrows drew in, confusion blooming across his face. My son, I said, was given to another family. He went very still. And theirs was given to me. He didn't say anything for a long moment. I raised him, I continued. Loved him with everything I had, but he didn't love me back. Not really. His eyes searched mine, slowly connecting pieces I wasn't saying aloud. You think I know you are. He looked down at the envelope, picked it up with trembling hands. Inside were the documents, the timeline, the explanation, Ruth's letter with her quiet confession. He read in silence. Every second stretched into forever. When he finished, he didn't look at me right away, just set the papers down, his fingers still resting on the edges like he needed to hold on to something. This is a lot, he finally said. I know. And you're Margaret? Yes. He looked up, his eyes glassy. I don't feel anything. Not yet. You don't have to, I said. I'm not here to ask for a place in your life. I wanted you to know. I needed you to know. He nodded slowly. Why now? Because I couldn't live with the silence anymore. Because the truth deserved to breathe. He leaned back, exhaling hard. I have parents. They raised me well. I know. I would never ask you not to love them. We sat in that tiny room, surrounded by books and the scent of old paper and peppermint tea. And I felt something I hadn't in years. Relief. Not joy, not closure, but the freedom of no longer carrying something so heavy alone. He stood after a while, pacing slowly. I don't know what to do with this, he said honestly. I don't either, but I don't hate you. Tears filled my eyes. That's more than I expected. He turned to face me again. You didn't have to come, but you did. I didn't know how not to, I said. He nodded again, a quiet understanding settling between us. Can we take it slow? He asked. I don't want to make this something it's not. I wouldn't ask for anything else. He gave me a faint, fragile smile. You want to stay for tea? I smiled back. I'd love to. We didn't talk about the files again that afternoon. We talked about books and weather, and how he hated the sound of wind chimes but loved the rain. And though the past still sat between us, unopened and raw, we had started something. Not a relationship. Not yet, but maybe, just maybe a beginning. By the time fall arrived, there were other changes besides the leaves. The house sold more quickly than anticipated. I received more than I had anticipated, and the whole asking amount. There were no extensions or renegotiations. Ethan and Olivia had to leave within 30 days. I wasn't angry when I evicted them. That house had been my jail for far too long, so I had to evict them. It was like seeing a theater set being disassembled as they packed up their well-planned lives, box by box, knowing that each cushion, plant, and designer item had been purchased on loan. The illusion was gone, the performance was ended. I drove by on the day the moving truck arrived. I continued. I simply observed from a distance as Olivia yelled commands at the movers, concealing her remaining dignity behind her sunglasses. Ethan was running in circles while standing on the grass with his phone clamped to his ear. I wonder whether he ever imagined this day would come. I wonder whether he was aware that I would bring it. It wasn't a dramatic fall. It was complete, but there were no yelling bouts or scandals on the local news. Olivia's parents stopped providing financial assistance. Her company lost all of its key sponsors. Her once immaculate brand was now a topic of conversation in the community. The woman who had made fun of me in my own kitchen was suddenly unable to pay for her daily matcha or her expensive skincare brand. Ethan looked for any kind of work. However, doors did not open for someone without a degree, recommendations, or recent experience. He took a modest flat on the outskirts of the city. The lawyer told me this. Since this wasn't about retaliation, I didn't inquire, but I also didn't rejoice. It was about repercussions and the truth. In the meantime, my life was gradually and discreetly changing into something new. Michael and I kept getting together, usually informally, for coffee, book talks, article sharing, and brief life observations. When he once inquired about my writing, I informed him that I had begun a memoir and that, even if I never finished it, I still had a narrative to tell. "You should," he said. "Narratives, such as those, are important." I didn't expect him to call me Mom, and he still hadn't. The point wasn't that. The key difference was that we were creating something voluntarily rather than out of duty. Together, we strolled around the farmer's market one day. He laughed and grabbed up a jar of apple butter. "My mom used to make this every autumn." The way he stated "my mum" didn't hurt for some reason. He had a mother, and I had a kid who didn't see me until it was too late, so it felt natural, acceptable, and proper. On other evenings, I sat by myself with my tea and wondered whether Olivia was still wearing her silk robes, if Ethan was sleeping on a mattress or the floor, and if they looked at each other and noticed everything they had previously disregarded. They weren't missed by me. I failed to see what we were meant to be. But that kind of pain is a shadow. It gradually disappears. And as you come to love yourself more than you love their approval, pride grows. Before the sale closed, I took a final stroll through my former neighborhood to say goodbye, not to haunt it. I went by Ethan's old school, the park where I used to push him on swings, and the supermarket where I used to count coupons to buy his favorite cereal. I gave all I had to a family that never gave anything back. So I let it all go. I was now giving to someone who would never call me Mom, but who yet treated me with respect, kindness, and interest. You don't always need to be saved. All you need is tranquility, and I was at last beginning to sense it. I received the SMS from Ethan in early November. "Can we meet?" is all that is needed. Only once. I looked at it for a while. Weeks had passed since I last saw him, and the stillness and distance felt more pressing than any disagreement we might have had. However, the tone wasn't accusatory, irate, or desperate. The sound was one of submission. We met at a little park on the outskirts of town, the sort with a track that wound around a dried-up pond and rusty seats. I chose the location because it was ghost-free and memory-neutral. He was sitting on a seat with his hands clasped between his knees when I got there. When he looked up, I briefly saw the kid he had once been, clumsy, uncertain, and seeking guidance. I took a seat next to him, being cautious not to get too near. He cleared his throat. "I'm not here to ask for anything," he said. Without saying anything, I nodded. I wanted to understand." I took the manila envelope with Ruth's letter, the paperwork, and the DNA results out of my backpack once more. Without saying anything, I gave it to him. He held it in his lap, as if he had read it 1,000 times before, without opening it. In his own words, "I did a test of my own, after you informed me. Same outcome." I gave another nod. "I spent weeks trying to figure out what to do with it," he said. "And I kept thinking, if I wasn't your son, then what was I?" I gave him a serious look at that moment and stated, very quietly, "You were my child. But I treated you like, I know how you treated me." He flinched. With haste, he responded, "I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't deserve it." "Simply put, you don't," I said. "But that doesn't mean I hate you." His eyes were glistening as he turned to face me. "Then what does it mean?" "It means I finally love myself more than I love the idea of you." The ensuing quiet was very meaningful. He lowered his head. I thought I was protecting Olivia, standing by her, but I was just hiding behind her, wasn't I? "You let her rewrite the story, and you handed her the pen." Slowly, he nodded. "I wish I could undo it." "You can't." We sat like that, two people who had lived a lie together, unraveling it in the chilly November air. Then he said something that caught me off guard. "I hope he's good to you." Startled, I turned to face him. "It was Michael," he explained. "Your son." My throat tightened each breath. "He's kind," I remarked, gentle. He gave a little smile. "I guess some of that came from you then." We both chuckled, softly, exhausted, not happy, but not angry either. When he eventually said, "I don't want to be in your life if it hurts you, but if there's ever a place for me, just a corner of it," he left the sentence hanging. He didn't have to. I stood there and gazed at the pond. On the surface, leaves were dispersed like ashes. When I said, "I'll think about it," he gave a nod. "That's more than I hoped for." I briefly put my hand on his shoulder as I turned to walk away. And there was it. The last instant, not resolution, but comprehension. I came to the realization that this was sufficient since I was no longer required to fix him. Nor did I need to be repaired. All I wanted was freedom. I was too. I was really. I've always felt that the word, freedom, sounds too grandiose, like it belongs in speeches and parades rather than something that people like me might truly experience. However, I finally realized what that meant when I turned the key on Michael's bookstore's front door that morning. The previous evening, he had called to tell me he had something to show me. There was something boiling beyond the surface of his casual tone, a weight to it. He was standing at the rear wall, where a fresh wooden sign had been put over an arched entryway as I entered. According to the placard, the next chapter. I grinned. "What's this?" He gave me one little, plain, polished brass key. "I'm establishing a new section with a coffee nook, a comfortable reading area, and community discussions. It has to feel more than a store, in my opinion. I desired a sense of belonging. In my palm, I flipped the key over. "And you want me to open it?" He gave me a serious look. "I want you to have it." I gazed at him. His voice was quiet as he went on. "You dedicated your entire life to someone. They handled you as though you were backdrop or furniture. However I see you, you don't have to convince me of anything. You've accomplished enough." My eyes filled with tears. I returned the blinks. "You don't have to do this," I said in a low voice. "I know," he said, "but I want to." I inserted the key into the lock and moved towards the door beneath the sign. The turn went nicely. Warm light came in through the large windows. The walls were adorned with shelves that were already partially filled with memoirs and classics. A little table with a tea set, a shabby rocker, and a rug in the middle. The room reminded me of a dream I had forgotten I had. Totally undone, I turned around. "Michael," I said. He grinned. "Consider it yours for however long you want it." I entered the middle of the room and stood motionless, taking in the aroma of fresh paper, wood, and opportunity. The last page of the old notebook was still blank as I sat in the flat one more time that evening. I was a woman who gave until I disappeared. I wrote. Then I turned into the woman who reclaimed everything, not with anger or fire, but with truth, stillness, and a power they never anticipated. I completed the contribution the next day. A portion of the proceeds from the sale of the house went directly to a nonprofit that helps women who are starting over, those who, like me, are rejected, abandoned, and undervalued. They phoned to express their gratitude, but I didn't need it because every time I entered the next chapter in that bookshop, I was reminded of who I was now. Margaret Walker, woman, survivor, creator of her own ending, rather than Olivia's maid or Ethan's mother. Permission to start anew was never required. Only a key, and I was holding it now, and it didn't open a door for anyone else this time. Mine was opened. I appreciate you listening. Remember to subscribe, and feel free to leave a comment with your tale. Your voice counts.